All right, Aaron, here we are back for another episode of IT Coach for Business Leaders. Today we're discussing again some of the survey results that we got back when we recently did a IT benchmarking survey. Just to recap the basics about that survey, 55 companies across the state of Tennessee responded, filled out the survey. In some cases, it might have been multiple people within a company, but 55 total companies filled out this survey, 13 questions long that asked about all types of different IT topics, their perspective on topics, some questions about the actual state of their own IT. Could be IT personnel or IT technology. But we have the results of the survey back. We've reviewed them. We got drew some interesting conclusions. And so now, as part of our podcast, we're discussing some of the things that we've learned about from those surveys. One trend that we identified was that companies in our state, the state of Tennessee, are generally lagging behind other regions when it comes to technology. And so we'll be discussing in today's episode why we drew that conclusion, which I would say also is supported by your experience over the last 20, almost 25 years with this company.
And I would say that I don't think that's a new phenomenon for here. Right. I think that's been true as long as I've been in InfoSystems. And I think part of it is just the geography, right? Chattanooga is a tier 3 city, and so we tend to lag behind in lots of areas. Internet speed, not one of them.
Right, yeah.
Kind of led the nation there, so that was nice. But in other fields of technology, it's always been a little behind the curve.
Yeah. So when we reviewed the survey results, we ran through a few pros and cons related to companies being behind on technology, almost like, well, if they're behind on technology, that's not always such a bad thing because, or if they're behind on technology, that is a bad thing because. So we ran through, some of the pros and cons. I'm going to read through some of these pros and cons, and then I'll let you kind of explain a little bit about each one. So the first pro for being behind on technology or lagging behind the curve on technology is companies avoid drama associated with living on the bleeding edge of technology, such as failures, etc.
Right.
Explain a little about that.
Well, absolutely. And we touched on it in our last episode too. We talked about the major industry leaders in IT have excellent marketing departments, right? Marketing and sales efforts are top of the line. And sometimes those efforts even outpace their engineering efforts. And so companies are known to release technology that's not quite mature yet. And that's not always the deliberate, trying to do the wrong thing, but sometimes it's just the very fact that it takes time for all those companies to come together and find the models that fits well. Being behind on the curve a little bit, you can avoid some of that drama because that technology, when it first came out, may not be all it was cracked up to be.
Right.
In that clever commercial that you saw. And that continues to be true. On an everyday basis, we see things that are being advertised that the IT professional is going to recognize that and say, well, that's nice, but that doesn't quite reflect reality.
Yeah.
Being a little behind, you can save some angst and some possibly even some downtime by not being out there a little too far.
Yeah, so I'm sure like everything, what you're really looking for is balance.
Sure.
You probably don't want to be the first to adopt a new technology that's not fully baked out, but you also don't want to be toward the end,
Right.
the last,
Yeah.
to adopt something, because
Absolutely.
there are other problems which we will talk about.
Yeah, because I mean, it's more than just bugs, right? So that certainly is a contributing thing. Is that new software, those .0 releases when they first come out, often have bugs in them. But beyond that, it's also integration with other things. Because if you jump on the bandwagon as soon as it comes out, it may not integrate well with the other things that you have in house because they haven't had a chance to catch up just yet. And so you've got to, being on the sidelines for a little bit may be a good thing.
I'm sure you've lived through a lot of those examples. I know I personally have. When I worked with a company that was a Microsoft Dynamics partner, when Microsoft made this whole transition to Dynamics 365, they used to pretty much do everything as an on-premise deployment. So whether it was the ERP or accounting software or CRM software or whatever, they made a huge transition to Dynamics 365, which was the whole software as a service initiative. And when they first released that, it was absolutely not ready for prime time, especially some of the bigger ERP packages, which are really intense workloads. And deploying that stuff in the cloud is not a lightweight initiative. It's a major thing. And so I've seen some of this, and personally I've been with marketing technology. A lot of times I've been on the cutting edge of adopting new technology, and even this year I started using a new marketing software platform that integrates with our website for live chat. And it was a new company, a new startup company that was really, has a lot of momentum in the marketplace, but they did a big revision or a big update of their software, and it broke a lot of the functionality that I had already built out. So, I mean, you kind of have to expect those kind of things if you're going to be that, on the front edge of new technology.
I think an example, and we may have talked about this on the podcast before, but we had a company that had just recently made a pretty big investment in desktop scanners because it was important for all their people to be able to constantly, at that point, get things in. They made a subsequent move over to a cloud-hosted provider that moved their entire environment into a terminal server environment, where no longer were they logging into their desktops, they were going out to a terminal server environment. Well, those scanners that they had just purchased did not integrate with that terminal server environment, and no one had thought to check that out ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those, wow, now what do we do? We had to take a step back and reevaluate their plan.
Yep. So let's go to the next one. This one's a con, and that is companies miss out on things that allow your competitors to gain an edge, such as insights or efficiencies, etc.
So, and I think there's a couple sections that, we all have ingrained in us that fear of missing out, right? So there's both the real missing out on things that your competition, if they are leveraging technology to give them better insights into their customer base, or to allow them to, manufacture a given widget in a more productive, fast way, or improve their shipping efficiencies or something like that. Those could be very real. There's also the perceived fear of missing out, which can just cause the executive to last, awake at night and cause some angst in the company. I think you can help with that second one, that fear of missing out that may not be grounded in reality.
Yeah.
Just by, some things we've talked about before, having good connectivity between your executive and your IT leadership, by, staying up to date with how technology is being used in your industry, whether it be attending your industry's conferences. A lot of those will have a breakout section for the technology, or often we some industries that have in the medical field, you'll see whole conferences dedicated just to learning about technology in that field.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage people to stay up to date on those.
Yeah, and I know I've seen, and I know you've seen, times when a company hasn't put in some type of new technology and they're just blown away, and their response, I've seen companies where their immediate response is, this is going to put us so far ahead of so-and-so or our competitor or the market, and so, there, like you say, there's legitimate times where you might be missing out on an opportunity to gain an advantage.
Absolutely.
So another con, if companies lag too far behind, such as like aging infrastructure or aging software systems, et cetera, it might become really costly to fix it.
Yeah, and that's when we see all too often, and you get into these scenarios. It's almost the converse of what I was talking about earlier about living on the bleeding edge and not having those integrations be able to work. If you let your technology get too old, especially your base infrastructure that's just the foundation of everything you do. If you let that get too old, the new software that you're trying to operate or to pull in, it may not work well with that old infrastructure, and then you get to a situation where you hadn't budgeted to deal with that right now, and then you're having to do it in a hurry. Well, anytime you have to do something in a hurry, you purchase, you don't get the best deal, right?
Right.
And I'll flip that. I've seen the exact opposite scenario too. Companies that clung to outdated software that they've been using, but they want to modernize and they want to have the latest, greatest, fastest computers, fastest connectivity. Sometimes that old software doesn't play well with that new stuff. It often doesn't.
Yeah.
And they paint themselves into a corner too, where some of that software can be some of the most expensive things to buy, especially if it's a very vertical, custom to your industry software. That can be very expensive. And so if you've not followed that natural upgrade path, you often cannot move a piece of software from, say, version 1 to version 7. That may not be just a simple step. It may be, I need to go through the iterations. I need to go to version 2.5 and then 4 and then 5.5 and then 6 and then 7. That adds up in a hurry if you're having to do that all at once.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, I think there could be two major reasons why companies get that far behind. One is they've made the distinct decision that we're gonna get every penny, we're gonna squeeze every penny out of this investment that we've made. If it's still working, let's just let it go as long as we possibly can. And they don't understand the situation they're getting themselves into. And the other major thing could just be neglect.
Mm-hmm.
They just they're not actively managing their IT systems, and so they don't realize that things are getting so out of date and the cost that's going to be associated to it. So another pro, balancing the ROI of investments with the cost of upgrading.
Yeah, so if you're staying on top of technology, you can find that some investments that you go out there, that your return on them will literally pay, for that investment. I'll give you a silly little example, the one we're working with right now. We're working with a company that they have been using analog phone lines to relay their paging between their branch offices. They have overhead paging.
Mm-hmm.
We found that they recently switched providers, and they started getting some problems with people calling into those phone lines and causing telemarketing calls to be broadcast over their overhead paging system.
Oh, wow.
So we were able to find that there was a way of converting that to a digital system so that they could first fix the telemarketing problem, but beyond that they were able to eliminate a analog phone line. Well, it's not a great deal of expense, but the piece of equipment that allowed them to do this was $75. the monthly cost of the phone line is $35. So that quickly, literally paid for itself. So that's a small example, but that's the type of thing that I'm talking about. If you'll stay up to date on your technology, you often can justify the expense just in the return investment that you'll get.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of technology. I know a lot of people probably view technology as the cost is always growing and compounding. The more technology we buy, the costs continue to go up. But that's not really the case. A lot of the advancements in technology are consolidating and making things, simplifying, consolidating, eliminating costs, and so there's just as much chance that new technology purchases are going to be a cost savings in the long run than they are going to be cost addition or compounding. But I think it's interesting that that pro balancing the ROI of investments with the cost of upgrading. We're calling it a pro because you want to sit back and wait and be able to see if we make so and so investment, what are the downstream effects that are going to take place? What is it going to save money? Is it going to cost money? Is it going to cause problems? Is it going to create efficiencies, etc.? So, I think the point is you're not making snap decisions as new technology is available.
Right.
You're sort of hanging back and just making sure, hey, this is going to be a smart investment in the long run. We're going to make sure that the ROI is there before we move forward. And to me, that shows the proactive mindset toward IT instead of a reactive mindset. Which you pointed out can cost a lot of money when you're having to make those snap decisions and being reactive to things.
Yeah. So, it goes back again to making sure any money that you spend on technology should be as part of solving a business problem.
Yeah.
Or making business more efficient in some way.
You mean we're not all in this just to have the latest, greatest technology that we can show to people? There's actually business okay, so one of the survey questions, with this we're going to get into a little more perspective on like a specific question and what answers came back and why. But one of the survey questions that was asked, it basically asked the person to select all. It was a multi-select question where there were a whole lot of options and they could select all that apply. So select all of the considerations that would be most important to them when choosing cloud services. And when we were discussing the results of the survey, we noted that the answers that were given kind of highlighted the fact that companies, the point of this podcast or the subject here, which is that a lot of companies in our region are lagging behind on technology, compared to other regions. And to clarify here, we're not talking about whether companies are actually using the cloud or not. This is just how they feel about if they were choosing a cloud solution, what would be the most important factors. And the top two answers that were given were security, which was overwhelming, far and above any other response, number one. And then next was low cost. So what does that say about the perspective companies have?
Yeah, so first of all, security, certainly super important, and all you have to do is turn on the news to see, no one wants to be a victim of a hack and have their company's name splashed all over the news, right? So security is a super important thing. Low cost, I get it, as one of our salespeople is fond of saying, we walked into a company that has unlimited bags of cash just sitting around wanting to spend it on IT. My issue with those being the two biggest choices, though, is that's not why you should be picking a particular service. The first thing, we said it a minute ago, first reason why you should be picking any technology is, does it solve a particular business problem you have?
Yeah.
So you should be looking, the answer what I would hope to be seeing in those answers is, it increases efficiency, or it allows us to do something, gives us some new ability that we didn't have before. I don't want to minimize the importance of security, but security should be something that is a given. Now, I know it's not, and there's providers out there that aren't secure, but security should be something that once I've made the decision that I'm going to go with something because it helps me, then yes, I want to make sure security is there. It just shouldn't be the driver.
Yeah.
Low cost, the same thing. We talked about a moment ago, return on investment. Well, the cost doesn't matter if it pays me dividends. If it decreases my spend elsewhere and then ends up paying for itself, then the cost doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, cloud is, I'm sure a lot of people view cloud as maybe this fluffy, hard to nail down what the actual business use is,
And it is.
Right, yeah, and that's true.
That's true.
But from our perspective, InfoSystems is a cloud provider. We have cloud infrastructure that we actively host customer environments, production environments, disaster recovery environments, all types of different cloud services. And these are, I think it's important to point out that when it comes to cloud technology, it's not really that new.
Right.
You're really just outsourcing something to somewhere else other than owning it on your own,
right,
on-premise, at your company location.
Somewhere there is a computer sitting in a room.
Right.
And there are blinky lights somewhere.
We're not, and the point I'm going to make is we're not really inventing new business cases for why this technology exists. It's technology that has existed for a long time.
Right.
It's just delivered in a different way.
Correct.
And so, I thought that was interesting that, so many people picked, security, yes, I agree. That's obvious. That should be, if not number one of the very top things people are considering. But low cost, when you're buying, I would be curious to know that when that company, if they're buying new equipment, is that one of the top two factors in the equipment that they buy, low cost?
Yeah.
It seems to me like there may be a disconnect there.
Yeah. Hopefully they're looking for quality over cost, right?
Yeah.
They're looking for that. Yeah, cost over the long haul. That's what matters. But
yeah,
we frequently find the lowest cost option up front is rarely the lowest cost option over the long haul.
Right.
I think another thing that this highlights is the fact that because security is the first thing, anytime I have a cloud discussion with any business owner, then almost without exception, the number one objection or the first thing that comes to mind is, well, is my stuff going to stay safe? And I get that because, there's this certain warm, fuzzy, touchy-feely from being able to see that there's my server sitting right there. I know where it is. I can put it behind a locked door. But that's a false sense of security because
right.
that server is connected out to the internet anyway. And you probably aren't as good at setting up security as these cloud providers are, that they're having to do this at scale.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a false sense that, I can't put my things up in the cloud because it's not going to be as secure. In a lot of cases, it's going to be more secure.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Now, you felt that the answers to two of the survey questions, this is kind of a positive spin on things, that the answers that came back for two of these survey questions showed an awareness and a positive perspective on how technology can be a driving force in your business strategy, but that there's an obvious lack of execution inside those companies. So do you think that's a pretty common scenario? Are people paying attention and really grasping how technology can transform the company, and even showing the openness to launch an initiative with some type of new technology, but there's something, for some reason, just not pulling the trigger.
Yeah, I do, and I think we're getting closer. We're getting up on that curve to where more and more people are seeing the benefits. But right, they're not quite executing yet. So why? Well, part of it's confusion, because there's a lot of companies out there with a lot of different messages, and they don't all, match up with each other. So
Right.
there's a lot of confusion. Mentioned a minute ago, there's still a lot of fear, and companies help sow that within each other, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's, you throw that at your competitors to try to keep them from going with that. So that holds people back. And again, I think it just goes back to not having a clear picture of what it is you're trying to achieve with technology, of not defining it. Sometimes it's just technology for the sake of technology, rather than first sitting down as like, okay, what business problem are we trying to solve here, and how can we best do that?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just kind of thinking through kind of a perspective on this question, and if you think about cloud technology or any new technology really, just think of the bell curve, right? There's a phase one where the companies that provide this technology are really heavily promoting the fact that it's a new technology.
Right.
And a lot of people won't really understand or grasp, well, what's it really going to do for me? Okay, I understand that you've got this new technology. What's it really going to do? And so then you've got a second phase of the education that takes place, where people really begin to grasp how the new technology applies to their business and how it can change things. And then, third, you've got that downslope of the bell curve where it becomes the norm in business. And if you look at what a lot of the technology company leaders and a lot of analysts are saying right now, is that the way forward for most companies is going to be hybrid.
Right.
Cloud, where some stuff lives on premise and some stuff is in the cloud, and the key focus is going to be making it all work together in the best way. And I think what they're saying is nobody's just going to own everything just because they only want, that's their chosen model, or nobody's going to go all cloud just because that's their chosen model. That they're going to realize, hey, there's a pros and cons to both, and so for different purposes and different times and different reasons, I'm going to use a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and in the end, I'm going to end up with this blended approach.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's really where we're at with the whole cloud thing on this downturn of the bell curve. Is it's really just going to be the norm moving forward.
I think it is, and I think we're getting much closer to that. I was thinking while you were talking there that a lot of the promise of cloud, from the very outset, has been the ability to reduce costs through scale, by scaling up in these cloud environments. And I think part of the reason is, as we've still been on that early adoption, as we've been climbing up the bell curve, some of those promises don't really pay off until we reach a critical mass of to where you've got enough companies that are in there investing in that, so that these cloud providers can provide that at a lower cost. Because if you build out a cloud hosting environment that's able to host, we'll just throw out a round number, 1 million people, but you've only got 30,000 subscribers, you're not going to be able to offer the best prices, right?
Right.
So, I think the cloud environment is starting to we're starting to reach that critical mass.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll start to see those prices become to where it does become just ubiquitous throughout.
So, talking about the fact that, it's common for companies in our region to lag behind on their technology, what their competitors in other regions where they're probably at. Let's sum up the conversation with some actionable steps that company leaders can take to begin the process of heading in the right direction. So I'll read a few steps that we've talked about that companies can take, and you can add some perspective on that. So, and this is not anything new. This is something we've happened to talk about this just a couple of times so far. But executive leadership and IT are not on the same page. Just again, what's a first step a company can take?
We're just going to keep beating that drum because the message needs to get out there. So first step is management executives and IT leaders need to be engaged with each other. They need to be sitting at the table together. I would say your IT people need to be, your IT, a representative from IT needs to be at your management meetings. Mm-hmm. and working through that. And we talked about, if you want more details on that, go back and watch episode 10. We talked about this, put in a plug for that, but it talked about in a little more detail there. Mm-hmm. So I think that's step one, is that there's got to be connectivity there, so IT knows what the business's challenges are, and the executive leadership knows what technology can do for them.
So here's another thing that has to be overcome in order for a company to move in the right direction. A lot of times, the representatives from a technology company, a technology provider, they're seen as a salesperson. And just yesterday in an internal meeting here at InfoSystems, we were talking. One of our sales representatives was talking about salespeople at a car dealership. He was just like, you don't even understand from their perspective how hated they feel.
Yeah.
Like, put yourself in their position, knowing that every person that drives on your car lot is trying to avoid you, sees you as the enemy. I mean, at no point in time do people go to a car lot and really view the salesperson as an advisor, someone I can trust to steer me in the right direction. There's that barrier that people put up, and they see you as the adversary instead of the advisor, and that exists in technology too. So do you have any thoughts on that?
So I'll put some of the onus on that on us, the technology providers, right? So we have to, if we want to be treated as trusted advisors, we have to be trusted advisors.
Yeah.
So I think that's step one, and that's always been my goal. I will sit down with an IT, and I purposefully a lot of times don't get too in depth on how much things cost. There's some things I have to kind of know being the role I am, but I purposely don't spend too much time on that, because I want to be able to really, with full ethical consideration, be able to sit down with you, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner, and say, this is what I think will best benefit your business. Mm-hmm. And I'll get with the salesperson and get you a quote on that, because I don't know how much that's going to cost you.
Yeah.
So we need to treat it first that we're coming in to solve business problems. That's our goal, and that's my goal. My role is to sit down and be your advocate with our people, and I have to live that out. And so I would encourage the other technology providers. That's the way. That's the top-down approach. Our owner Clay has always trumpeted that approach, that it's all about solving business problems and making it a win-win. It's not about us winning at your expense. We have to both win from this deal.
Yeah, and just to continue with your comment about Clay Hales and InfoSystems and the culture at this company. This company has never been a sales company.
No.
I mean, it's always the focus from the time Clay started the company almost 25 years ago was, this is a technology company, and so our focus is going to be on having technologists, engineers and technicians, and the focus has been on certification and knowledge and expertise in our industry, not on, hey, let's get out there and really beat the streets and sell things.
Right.
So it's just sort of our company culture, and I think the podcasts, that we do is sort of a reflection of that. I mean, this is not a webinar where we're highlighting products and services and pitching people on reasons why they need to do business with InfoSystems. This is intended to be educational, to help business leaders in our footprint understand perspectives on emerging technologies, on business, on how technology and business works. I mean, you're really sharing some of your expertise just on a public platform for free. We're not asking for money. I mean, this is really just an educational platform. And so, I just think that kind of all, if someone out there sees InfoSystems, I understand with other providers, there are some really pretty nasty sales tactics out there, in the greater marketplace. But here in East Tennessee, I mean, honestly, if you view InfoSystems as with that perspective, you really don't know our company very well. Another step that a company can take to move into the right direction is bring in some outside perspective, some outside consultation. How can you or InfoSystems help with that? And just to clarify, I mean, this is not a sales pitch. We bring in outside experts to help with stuff we do all the time.
Yeah, and if you're honest with yourself, any business brings in outside help for things that they're not experts on, whether it be electricity, plumbing, just the basics. And IT should be no different. We've talked about the cross-pollination concept before, is that you want to bring in people who have access to a lot of companies, a lot of cross-industry, and even your competitors, not because they're sharing trade secrets, but because they have experience in dealing with that industry as a whole. And as you mentioned, we do that. You mentioned, I think, last episode, the reason we're sitting in this different environment right now is we're remodeling our offices. And it's been a top to bottom remodel. I think we've touched every square inch of the property that we occupy.
Yep.
And we didn't do that in a vacuum. We didn't just, pick someone who's like, okay, you're in charge of that. We brought in outside help to get experts' opinions on ergonomics and how the whole office plan should flow, because that's not what we do.
Yeah.
And I have that discussion at least once a week with a business that we're courting their business, is that too often a lot of times it's the CFO or the office manager that they get stuck with the IT label, and they're like, that's not what I do, that's not what I went to school for.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not. So let us help you with that. Let us consult, or find, if it's not us, find someone that is what they do, because they can bring the best practices to you.
Yeah.
So that you're not making mistakes.
Yeah, and I mean, when you bring up the office remodel, it's not like we just gave away all of our old furniture and said let's go buy some new office furniture. We actually brought in a consultant who helped us change the way our offices were laid out to have a better impact on the way our teams work together internally. Right. And so we brought in outside consultation to help us even map out the floor plan of our office space to be a reflection of how we do business and to facilitate the way we do business. It would have been really easy just to throw everything away because it's old and beat up and say, hey, let's go buy new tables and chairs.
Right.
But that wouldn't really have accomplished the goal of what we wanted to do here. And so like you say, with IT systems, it's not just, hey, I'm going to throw away my old server and buy a new one because it's time to upgrade. It's where are we right now, and where do we want to be, and how do we get there? Yeah,
if you just get caught up in, I just got to have the latest processor and more RAM and everything, well, why? Start with what are we trying to accomplish, and then build your plan around that.
Well, I think that's a pretty good place to leave off today's discussion. But again, I think these are some great episodes where we're able to extract some of the information from the survey that we completed and dive into a little bit of a deeper look at what that means. So hopefully we can kind of continue this maybe for a few more episodes. With 13 questions from the survey, we've got plenty of information there to pull out. And again, for anyone who did not fill out the survey, because only the people who filled out the survey get the final report, if you contact me directly, joshd@infosystems.biz, or call our office 423-624-6551, and you can connect to me through the phone system, I will make sure you know how you can also get the IT survey report, because I think this is really valuable information let me just clarify too, that's the reason we did this survey. It helps me. I mean, it's great for market research to understand what's going on out in the marketplace, but local business leaders need that information too. And so, I don't want to place that behind bars. I want to make it accessible. I'm not just going to blast it out publicly, because that's really that's not fair to the people who actually took time to respond to the survey. But there is a way you can get it. If you contact me, I'll help you with that. But thanks again, Aaron, for joining us for the podcast and sharing all of your expertise and knowledge. And I look forward to the next time.
All right, maybe next time we can talk about the lack of integration between management executives and IT.
You think that'll come up? I
I
doubt it. It never does. Thanks.